The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
The Gershwins, a composing team, were as unlikely a pair as perhaps Richard Rodgers and Larry Hart. They're brothers, but they don't look alike. One's tall, one's short. One's an athlete, one's a homebody who reads books, and one's a composer, and one's a great lyricist. But together, they comprised one of the most talented and versatile songwriting teams in history. Now, like many other Broadway composers of that era, their parents came to the U.S. to escape persecution of the Jews that became so prevalent in Eastern Europe in the late 1880s through the beginning of World War I. They were married in New York, their parents, and the kids were, both the boys were born in New York. Now, they thrived in New York City, and George's music reflects the city's fast-paced tempo. We're going to look at the Gershwins' early life as you listen to the song that George felt personified New York. His working title for the song was Syncopated City, but we know it as Fascinating Rhythm. Here's the London Promenade Orchestra. Okay. George Gershwin's not here to play today, to play Swanee, his hit, but we have someone even better. We have Daisy Lin. Daisy, as you can see, is a classically trained pianist, born and raised in Taipei, Taiwan, educated there, taught there, came to Albany to attend St. Rose, where she obtained a graduate degree. And now she's a musician of several types, coach, teacher, teaches Mandarin, and a new mom. Alina's in back there watching today. So here to play for us, George Gershwin's version of Swanee is Daisy Lin. I should add that while Daisy's playing, I won't be putting any slides up other than the title of the song. So you're free to watch her ply her trade as well as listen to her. Okay. But that version that you just heard was not the one that became so popular. For one night, Al Jolson heard George Gershwin playing it at a party, and he decided to use it in his review. He sang it in blackface in the manner of a minstrel show, which is often done in those days. And that is the version that became so popular. Here's Al Jolson.
I've been away from you a long time. I never thought I'd miss you so. Somehow I feel your love is real. Near you I want to be. The birds are singing it is songtime. The angels running soft and low. I know that you yearn for me too. Swanee, you're calling me. Swanee, how I love you, my dear old Swanee. I give the world to be among the folks in the IX. I even know my mammy's waiting for me, praying for me down by the Swanee. The folks up north will see me no more when I get to that Swanee shore. I love the old folks at home. Swanee, how I love you, my dear old Swanee. I give the world to be among the folks in the IX. I even know my mammy's waiting for me, praying for me down
In the 1920s, the Gershwins composed musical comedies, and one of their big hits was 1926's "Okay." Now, in 2012, a version of a new musical, Nice Work If You Can Get It, was staged on Broadway, and it's loosely based on the same show and included many of the songs. So that's very opportune for us because we're going to hear the stars of the Broadway version, Kelly O'Hara and Michael Broderick, sing the next two songs. In fact, the touring company made a pass through Proctor's last January. Wonderful show. So what we're going to hear is Kelly O'Hara singing Someone to Watch Over Me. And while we're going to do that, we've heard about George's early success. We're going to hear how Ira came to write lyrics for George's music. Here's Someone to Watch Over Me. All right, the following year, the Gershwins had another hit musical comedy, Funny Face. It starred not Fred and Ginger, but rather Fred and his sister Adele, who danced with him before Ginger Rogers. Funny Face included a song that highlights Ira's creativity when composing lyrics for George's music. In this case, George composed first. Ira preferred that he would compose the lyrics to that. There are many number of ways. That could be a discussion in itself, how composers worked with each other. But so Ira got the music. When he was done, he took on the challenge. So here, once again, are Matthew Broderick and Kelly O'Hara singing a song whose title actually begins with an apostrophe. It's wonderful.
Billy, I'm not exactly certain if I have one wife or two wives, but if you would agree to be my fourth or maybe it's fifth wife, I promise you you'll be the one I'm with for the rest of my life. Life has just begun. Jack has found his Jill. Don't know what you've done, but I'm all athrill. How can words express your divine appeal? You can never guess all the love I feel. From now on, lady, I insist. For me, no other girls exist. It's wonderful, it's marvelous. You should care for me. It's awful nice, it's paradise. It's what I love to sing. You made my life so glamorous. You can't blame me for feeling amorous. Oh, it's wonderful, it's marvelous that you should care for me. Don't mind telling you, in my humble fashion, that you thrill me through with a tender passion. When you said you care, imagine my emotion. I swore that in their permanent devotion, you made all other boys seem dry. Just you alone filled me with eyes. It's wonderful, it's marvelous, marvelous. You should care for me. Awful nice, it's paradise. It's what I love to sing. My dear, it's funny how time. From now on, my heart's working overtime. Oh, it's wonderful, it's marvelous that you should care for me.
Wonderful indeed. Okay. In 1930, the Gershwin put out their last major musical comedy, Girl Crazy, and introduced to Broadway stage two actresses who would go on to become big stars. One of them was an 18-year-old who had been discovered singing in a nightclub. She had to shorten her name to fit on the marquee. Here's how she described herself. I sing honest, loud but honest. And for 25 years on Broadway, she was the dominant star. You figured out who it is? That's right, Ethel Merman, shown here 16 years later as Annie Get Your Gun. Now in the show, she belted out the Gershwin hit, I Got Rhythm. And Daisy is going to play I Got Rhythm for us right now. Thank you, Daisy. Now, the show also featured a 19-year-old actress on Broadway for the first time, playing the part of the postmistress. She also sang a popular song, but it was never recorded, or at least she didn't record the song. Now, she would become a big movie star, but was not known as a singer. This is how she described her career. He was great, but don't forget, I did everything he did, backwards and in heels. So you obviously know that she became a blonde and was Ginger Rogers. And the song that she sang in Girl Crazy was Embraceable You. Now, you probably will recognize the singer, but while you're listening, I want to tell you about Ira's best friend from high school who had a strong connection with the singer, and you'll see that as it pans out. Here is Embraceable You, a simple song and yet very, very easy to listen to.
Embrace me, my sweet embraceable you. Embrace me, you irreplaceable you. Just one look at you, my heart grew tipsy in me. You and you alone bring out the gypsy in me. My lover, the many charms about you. Above all, I want my arms about you. Don't be a naughty baby. Come to Papa too. My sweet embraceable you. My lover, the many charms about you. Above all, I want my arms about you. Don't be a naughty baby. Come to Papa do. My sweet embraceable you.
Okay. By 1930, things had changed, and the Gershwins, because of the Depression and world economy and war impending, so the Gershwins turned to more serious topics, more substance than comedy. Strike Up the Band was a satire on Woodrow Wilson's repression of civil rights for anyone who favored the Germans during World War I. And you've heard the song, you know it. Here is Daisy with the title song from Strike Up the Band. Now, as early as 1920, George Gershwin had mentioned in an interview with a trade paper that he wanted to produce operettas and eventually an opera. But everything he did, he wanted it to be popular. So he was waiting for a vehicle to come along. And in 1925, DuBose Hayward, a Charleston, South Carolina author, wrote Porgy about blacks along their Cabbage Row, which became Catfish Row. And he approached George about it, and they were very interested, but he had a lot of other projects. So DuBose Hayward, along with his sister, produced a non-musical on Broadway in 27. But by the early 30s, George was ready to begin tackling it. And one of the issues that he had, he insisted on a black cast, but finding classically trained black voices or black people who could sing the parts was a challenge. He discovered Todd Duncan, who was a voice teacher at Howard University, and when he contacted him to come up for an interview, he was so skeptical that his Duncan, they didn't even bring his accompanist, but that was an issue. George played for him. And Duncan later said that I sang 8 measures, and he asked him to repeat it, and after that, Gershwin asked him to be his Porgy. That was it. Great voice. He ended up playing it over 1,800 times. Now, Bess was played by soprano Ann Brown. She was a Baltimore girl and had been rejected at the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins, a music school, because of her race. But she had a benefactor in the wife of the owner of the Baltimore Sun, and she got her into Juilliard. So she was at Juilliard when George Gershwin was beginning work on this. She wrote him a letter asking if she could audition. Had her down to sing, and indeed liked her, and she became Bess. So not only that, but as he was composing every day, when he had something new, he would have her come to his apartment, he would play the new work, and she would sing it for him to try out. And it's because of that work that he elevated the role of Bess, and that's why his opera became not Porgy, but Porgy and Bess. So we're going to hear Todd Duncan singing with the Eva Jesse Choir. Now, Eva Jesse was a black woman who was a choir director in Harlem, and she became the music director for the show. She was renowned, first black woman to be so acclaimed, and her choir. And we're going to sing Todd Duncan and Eva Jesse singing a song which kind of teaches us a lesson. And by the way, Gershwin, even though there were a lot of folk songs, and he went down there and lived there for a while to see what the people were like on the islands of South Carolina off Charleston, he wrote all the songs to have some consistency. So here is I've Got Plenty of Nuttin' by Todd Duncan and the Eva Jesse Choir from the 1935 version of Porgy and Bess.
And nothing's plenty for me. I got no car, I got no mule, I got no misery. Dog folks with plenty, I got a lot on the door. Pray somebody's going to rob it out. I'm making more. What for? Now I got no lock on my door. That's no way to breathe. Steal the rug from the floor, that's okay with me. All the things that I prize, like the stars in the sky, all are free. Oh, I've got plenty and I did, and nothing's plenty for me. I got my gal, I got my song, I got him the whole day long. Oh, there's no use complaining. I got my gal, got my Lord, I got my song. So they changed it, I know not to live with him. He ain't cross Richard no more, and ain't you hear how he just all time singing in the road. Happy
Now, as you note here, there have been many revivals, but the initial acceptance was so-so. It ran for 124 performances, which is 15 weeks, perhaps 8 a week. So the Metropolitan Opera offered to stage it, but George wanted to stage it on Broadway. He thought he would get a bigger audience. And it opened in Boston on tryouts September 30th, 1935, and it was 4 hours and 15 minutes long, 2 intermissions. So before it opened, 10 days later, on October 10th, at the Alvin Theater, which now is the Neil Simon Theater on West 52nd, it was cut to 3.5 hours, part of that being 2 intermissions still. And the reviews were, well, mixed at best. Now, Brooks Atkinson, the reviewer of the Times, the theater critic, who's the first place you went, he thought that the play was better than the one that DuBose Hayward had staged 8 years earlier. But as for the music, he deferred to the music critic. The Times also sent Olin Downs, their music critic. And his main problem with it was that he couldn't figure out what he was watching. Was it opera? Was it light opera in the manner of Gilbert and Sullivan's Pirates of Penzance? Was it a Broadway musical? He didn't know. It was hard to pigeonhole, and that caused problems. Many others were very critical, especially black folks, because they didn't like the stereotyping of the people in the South by white Northerners, especially depicting drug use and violence. So initially it was not well received, and it did not make money. But there were revivals. In 1942, there was a successful revival, profitable. And then in 1952, the State Department sent it on a tour of Europe. And it went through, played at La Scala in Milan. It played in Moscow. And it starred, the touring version there starred William Warfield and Cab Calloway and Leontine Price. And that did a lot to boost the reputation of the play. Now, those had been cut short, though, under 3 hours, more in the manner of a Broadway show. But in 1976, the Houston Opera staged it in its entirety, and it got a lot of acclaim. It won a Tony Award for that. And subsequently, finally, in the 1980s, the Metropolitan Opera staged it. And in 2012, it was staged on Broadway, although it was in the manner of a Broadway musical. And the heirs to the Gershwins, the Strunskys, which were Ira's wife was a Strunsky, they're okay with it. They want it exposed. So even though it was not accepted widely initially, it has become the most popular and sets a standard for American operas. Now, because it didn't make money, that is, Ira and George lost money on it, they did what all composers did in the 30s. When they needed money, they went to Hollywood. They didn't like it because you would get hired, you'd make great money, but you would sit on the shelf. You didn't have that constant creativity. And sometimes you'd be hired by Daryl Zanuck or whatever and put on the shelf just so the others couldn't have you. But they went west in 1936, and George did not realize, but this would be his last trip. They're shown here arriving in Los Angeles, and they were there to work on a movie, Shall We Dance? This one starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. In that movie, Fred Astaire sings another standard, "You Can't Take That Away From Me." They can't.
The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea, the memory of all that. No, they can't take that away from me. The way your smile just beams, the way you sing off key, the way you haunt my dreams. No, they can't take that away from me. We may never meet again on the bumpy road to love. Still I'll always keep the memory of way you've changed my life. No, no, they can't take that away from me. No, they can't take that away from me.
Okay. So we've seen that George composed popular songs, Broadway melodies. He composed an opera. I want to talk a little bit about his work as a classical composer. He is shown here in 1925. In 1926, he composed 3 preludes, which are they're pieces that are relatively short, independent instrumental compositions, free in form and resembling improvisation. So Daisy is going to illustrate that for you right now by playing Prelude Number 1, a brief piece. And you'll see that the opening 5 notes theme is repeated throughout that. Daisy? Thank you, Daisy. Okay, in 1924, Paul Whiteman asked George Gershwin to write an experimental piece for an evening of experimental music. Actually, Ira read about it in the paper. Paul Whiteman had neglected to tell George that he wanted him to do it until he called the next day. He only had 5 weeks to get it ready. That piece became Rhapsody in Blue, which is still heard regularly and is George's probably best known work. One of the reasons it's best known is because United Airlines has been using it since 1987. In their ads, in their safety briefing, if you run from the tunnel underneath the main terminal out to the island, it's played there. And their whole reasoning behind it, the reasoning of the Leo Burnett Agency, based in Chicago as United is, was that they want the business traveler to know that our orchestration, or we orchestrate everything to make your trip safe and convenient for you. So, but before that, in 1978, Ira's friend, Al Kahn of United Artists, came to him because Woody Allen wanted to make a movie about Manhattan, and George Gershwin's music exemplified Manhattan to Woody Allen. And Ira had been very protective of George's work, had never let it out much, but he agreed with the stipulation that you not just use Rhapsody in Blue, that you use a lot of other tunes. And indeed, there were several in the movie. Some of them, most of them, performed by Zubin Mehta in the New York Philharmonic, a few of them by the Buffalo Philharmonic, conducted by Michael Tilson Thomas. So we are going to close today after a hardware adjustment. What we are going to hear, we're going to hear the opening 4 minutes. Rhapsody in Blue is 14 minutes in length if played in its entirety, but we're going to hear the opening 4 minutes of Rhapsody, or the movie, in which Woody Allen uses Rhapsody in Blue. And you have to understand, you can hear him talking here because the premise is that he's trying to put to paper the first line of a novel he's writing about the city. So let's see if we can pull this off.
Desensitized by drugs, loud music, television, crime, garbage. Too angry. I don't want to be angry. Chapter 1. He was as tough and romantic as the city he loved. Behind his black-rimmed glasses was the coiled sexual power of a jungle cat. I love this. New York was his town, and it always would be.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Daisy?